Today we have special guest, Jimmy Guest. See what I did there? On today's show, and we'll dive into the following topics. The path to technical mastery, where we'll discuss Jimmy's influences as well as inspirations such as arcades of the 80s and 90s. We'll also take a trip down memory lane with nostalgia, Nintendo, and emulation. We'll talk about 80s tech, the precursor to today's innovation. And we'll wrap it up with an 80s movie trivia challenge. Jimmy, I hope you're ready for that, buddy.
I'm ready. Thank you for having me.
Good. And in between, we'll be sampling some great German brews today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Nerds on Tap. I'm your host, Tim Shoup, and I couldn't be more excited to embark on this nerdy adventure with all of you. So grab your favorite brew, because things are about to get exciting.
3, 2, 1, go!
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Nerds on Tap, where we talk business, entrepreneurship, with technology being a key focus in all conversations, and in between, we taste some tasty brews. I'd like to thank today's sponsors again. Digital Boardwalk provides comprehensive technology management and consulting services for small and medium-sized businesses across the country, helping customers achieve reliability, security, and peace of mind through award-winning support, cybersecurity, cloud computing, and backup services. Also, Smarter Web, an exclusive marketing partner of Digital Boardwalk, providing data-driven marketing solutions to businesses across the world. So before we do our first beer tasting, let me introduce Mr. Jimmy Guest. He is the escalations manager at Digital Boardwalk, specializing in server and network repair and finding issues in quick situations with root cause resolution. Growing up, he had the motto, "No machine will beat me." Sounds like something from Terminator, Jimmy.
Terminator 2, actually, I got it from.
His father was a computer specialist for the city of Lakeland Police Department. His uncle was also an inspiration in his technical life. He was a child of the 80s, so we'll see how he does as we have a special soundbite trivia segment in today's podcast. Very exciting, and I think we're going to stump him on at least one out of the 6 audio segments. So I want to welcome Mr. Jimmy Guest to the show.
Thank you.
And thanks for being on. I'd like to also introduce my co-host, Tim Schaefer.
Hi, how you guys doing?
And Mr. Suds, our producer, sitting behind he's the face behind the screen.
Hello.
So, Suds, why don't you introduce us to our first? Now, first of all, we only have 2 beers on the show today because a little wizard, I think Jimmy's actually drinking a Yingling, aren't you, Jimmy?
That's correct.
But a little birdie told me that Jimmy actually likes sangria, folks.
That's correct.
Awkward silence.
Cricket.
Just kidding, Jimmy. Suds, take it away. Let's talk beer.
All right, our first beer is the Wernesgrüner Brewery Pils Legend. It's a brilliant golden color with discrete hops taste and has a note of bitterness. It's from the Wernesgrüner Brewery, founded in 1436 in Steinberg, Wernesberg in Germany. 4.9% ABV. That's that.
This is very good. I actually had one of these
flavor.
last night because I brought these from home. So,
Nice.
What do you think? Suds? Is that your kind of beer?
Yes.
Your kind of beer.
It's
Jimmy?
my kind of beer.
Jimmy, what are you drinking?
Yingling.
All right. Jimmy's having a Yingling.
You guys want to know about Yingling?
No.
Yes.
No.
Look, I'm kidding.
It's America's oldest brewery, established in 1829. It is now also the largest wholly American-owned brewery. It was founded by German brewer David Gottlieb Jungling, and is still family-owned.
Hey, I didn't know it was the oldest brewery.
No, I didn't know that
Popular
either.
in the 90s. It was
Oldest?
popular during the 1980s.
And now because Budweiser and Miller and them sold,
Yeah.
it's now
Oh, okay.
the largest American brewer.
I thought the oldest brewery was the old Moonshiner distilleries up there in the mountains of Tennessee.
You're probably right, but let's say official, you know.
So let's kick off today's show and let's give Jimmy the floor. We're going to dive into Jimmy's early inspirations. In our first segment, The Path to Technical Mastery, we're going to talk about, let's kick it off, Jimmy, and talk about the influence that your father and uncle that we mentioned earlier had on you as a child of the, basically a child of the 80s tech revolution.
So thank you for asking, Tim. My father, not only being my hero, was a big influence of mine. He, back probably 85, they started getting into computers at the Lakeland Police Department and started going from ticketing books to actual computers. He brought home, the first thing I can remember is he brought home a Tandy 1000, it was like a little brick like this, and it had a laptop on it. And loved it, played with it every time I could get in trouble with it, the whole 9 yards. So probably about, he would take me up there, show me the large printers that would print off the whole 9 yards. So I got into computers at an early age. Remember the first day we got a Commodore 64 because they used that there as
So wait. You were a commie.
Oh,
Commie, yeah, Commodore 64.
That
First
makes
day we
sense.
had it, I remember because they were going to get it for the police department, so he wanted to get one. I watched him load it the next day. My mom asked me what I was doing, and I said, I'm loading the thing. I watched him, was able to grasp on it, and I took off from there.
how old exactly would you say?
I was probably 8, 7.
Okay.
Jimmy, so I was an Atari 800 guy. That was my first computer that I talked my dad into finally getting me. He figured it would change my life, and it did.
It did.
But I had a little program on my Atari that I kind of coded where it ate a Commodore logo.
Oh,
I'm sure. We could talk more about that.
Go ahead, buddy.
I learned, my uncle at the same time was, at the time when my dad was in the police department, was a computer technician at Lakeland Regional Hospital, I think it was called at that time. I remember my grandma taking me up there and showing me the tape machines that would go back like this, the wine and the mainframes. I can remember all that. So at early age, I was exposed to electronics and exposed to things. And they both have been very influential in my life. My dad for the whole exposing me to electronics, exposing me to new technologies, and my uncle taught me my service ability. He was known as, I kind of also, when you mentioned my motto, I kind of also got that from him, because as he always would say growing up, he's like, if God put it together, it's a machine, it was put together, I could take it apart and put it back together. He was known as the printer god. He would take like a box of parts. They would give him, like, when he worked for Computerland, he moved over. The story he would tell me is that he would take a box of parts, put the printer back together, and be like, how did you do that? I just looked at the books and I put it together. So, that's the same thing I did when I was younger, is I would reverse engineer in my head. And that's where I got it from too. Quick, long story about my father, since you mentioned it too, is when they went over to Unix at the new police department, I'm sure you know about bulletin boards. When we used to have bulletin board VBS
I would love to
systems.
talk about bulletin boards.
Right. So I watched him sign in to use a program called Procom Plus. The first home computer, I think I sent you the picture, the first home computer we had was a 286. And I watched him sign in. So, of course, I used Procom to dial it back out. And I watched what he typed in. Procom Plus, I watched what he did as a keylogger so I could get in. The problem is, when you get into Unix, you can't just exit the session. You have to say kill session, da-da-da-da-da. Well, at the time, being, in junior high school, I thought I was cool about it. So I logged in, looked around, whole 9 yards, and I get this phone call from my dad asking me if I signed into the system. Of course, being the precocious teenager that I was, no, Dad, I never did. Then how is it signed in with that? Yeah. So long story short, wasn't a good evening at the house that night. But again, they both have done a very big inspiration in my life.
Let's talk about that. My dad was a big inspiration in my life, it definitely wasn't because of his technical prowess. I had to hook up his VCR for him. That's how technically, I don't want to use the word dumb because my dad's not with us anymore. But yeah, he was not very savvy. But he knew I wanted a computer so bad that he went out on a limb. It was a lot of money for him at the time to buy a computer. They were a lot more expensive back then. I ran a bulletin board system. Speaking of BBSs, I ran a bulletin board system for several years out of my parents' house. Phone call ringing all times of the day and night until my mom was like, this has got to stop. Pull the plug. And I was like, I can't pull the plug. I have customers. So she got me a phone line, which was really unheard of for a kid to get a phone line in their bedroom back then. So, of course, my brothers and sisters thought I was spoiled. But I ran a bulletin board system for probably 5 years called Rampage BBS. And the only reason a 14-year-old boy wanted a BBS back then wasn't just to play around and play with the software. It was to get free software. Because I would have people upload software to give them access
GIF
levels.
images work like that too.
Yeah. One story in particular, and this kind of goes back because in episode 1 we mentioned this, but I didn't actually go into the story. So one of my customers, my BBS was positioned outside of Fort Rucker, Alabama, in Enterprise, Alabama. And all the guys that came on my BBS were pilots. They were helicopter pilots. I was just a kid. I was a skater. The name of my BBS was Rampage BBS. I mean, it had a picture of a skateboard that drew out on the screen. And Red Baron was one of my regulars on there. And he said, hey, Maniac, that was my sysop name. He said, I would love to do a software swap with you. I need flight simulators. And I said, well, hey, I have flight simulators, but I need all this other stuff. And he had it. So I had my dad drive me to this guy's house one day on the base. I had all this software. My dad said, how do you know this guy? I mean, they were clueless. I mean, think about that today, dropping me off at a stranger's house that I met online.
I'll tell you mine in a second. It's about the same.
Real quick, I'm going to get to the punchline here.
Yeah.
I show up at the house. My dad waits out front. I walk to the door. The man's wife answers, and she said, can I help you? And I said, hey, I'm the Maniac here to see the Red Baron. And she lost it. She was like, honey, the Maniac's here to see you. Anyway, she made me a sandwich. Totally nice people. Red Baron, if you're out there and you're listening to this show, ping me. I would love to chat about that story because I tell that story a lot as it was a pivotal memory in my life.
It reminds me of the same thing, Tim, where back in that time frame, guys, there was things called copy sessions. And basically what it is that you would go and literally, like he just said, today's day and age, you'd be like, what the heck? But you literally go to like this like library or convention center and there'd be hundreds of Commodore 64s in there. And you would like, okay, there was a company called Epix that used to make, it was out of Tampa, I believe at one point, that used to make games like called California games, summer games, and winter games.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Yeah, you could go to the drawer as long as you brought floppies with you. You could go to the drawer, pull the drawer open, find it, go take it back to your system, copy it, and bring it back. And there's just so many people in this room. And it's not like today where you would think it. I mean, there could have been any kind of thing back in the day, but this was the 80s. It's okay. You could go in here and do that.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody thought any different. There was no cell phone. I mean, I couldn't put my cell phone. I mean, I went into this guy was a sheriff. Now, granted, the guy I went with was a friend of my dad's, was a sheriff. But I went with him to a unit that met all these sorts of people. There was no cell phone for me to say, hey, Mom, come pick me up.
Right.
No. It's just he's correct. That's how it was back then.
And things were a lot looser back then. Yeah. And you know what's funny is talking about users groups or copy groups. My dad actually came to me one day and said, hey, I know a guy at work. When I told him about your interest in computers, because he saw me reading BASIC from front to back, all these different books, he said, with your interest in computers, I told him about it. He said, there's this user group. And I didn't even know what a user group was yet. And he explained it to me. And I said, well, he was willing. My dad took me to this user group. Everybody he spoke to there, he was like, I know nothing. I'm bringing my son. He's I think I was 14.
I laughed
He's 14.
because that was the time.
And
that was the time.
I think I inspired my dad because I think my dad was impressed by the fact that I actually had a passion in something other than baseball. And So anyway,
same
he
with
took
my
me to
dad.
that, and he actually drove me to Rockville, Maryland, which was about an hour or so drive from where we lived, to get my first 5.25-inch floppy drive. I'll never forget the day we went shopping for that. It was one of the
I
best
still
days
remember
of my
the
life.
sound. The
Oh, yeah.
sound of a 5.25 floppy.
Popping it open. Yeah.
Or when it would load on the Commodore 64, it had a lower drive motor, guys, for you youngins here, that it would be like, vroom, and like you could hear, and you could hear the sectors on it going
Yeah.
because it would go bop, 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 bop.
Nice.
And that's how you would get around the copy protection, is you would put like a weight. The cops figured out that you could take empty shell casings and put it to the bottom to like set the drive up, and you could cut a hole in the top of the drive, weight it down so the sectors wouldn't jump when you're doing it. It would copy the disk.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into something else, Jimmy. Let's talk about the 80s and arcade magic. And I mean,
Cool, yeah.
I really miss arcades. I mean, I'm actually going down to a Saints game this weekend, and I take my son, and we're actually going to Dave & Buster's the night before just to get, just to do some arcade stuff, because I want him to know what things were like for us growing up, and that's the closest we can get to it nowadays. But let's talk about 80s arcade magic and the allure of games from that era. Let's talk about some games. Let's talk about those arcades that we really miss and what went on in those arcades. Do you remember going to every slot and trying to find free quarters?
Free quarters, how the machines worked, how I can remember another thing you kids won't remember these days, Chuck E. Cheese. Chuck E. Cheese was the
Chuck E.
pizza
Cheese
joint.
is still open, right?
Yeah, it's
But
still
back,
open.
back in the 80s, they had their own little. They had they had arcades. Everything was arcade. You could go to like they had like Family Fun Center, arcade. Everything was coin op. I never can remember, and I never will forget hearing the sound when you come up. You hear the machine, the sound of like that. Anybody, have you seen Tron? Have you seen the movie Tron?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Do you know that movie?
Thing. Yes, very well.
You do know it very well? Cool.
I know Tron very well. Tron is a great movie to where like that. The first game I heard, again, I don't remember my age, but I was young, and we went around the corner, I had already known of Star Wars when I was a kid, and I'd actually remembered the movie. I was very into it because of sci-fi. My dad liked it. I remember turning the corner and seeing this arcade machine and hearing
blue. You saw a lot of blue, right?
And saw Obi-Wan, and saw hearing Obi-Wan saying, "The Force will be with you always." And you see this machine, just blue sitting there. Just blue sitting there, and it just was like, as a kid, you're looking at this thing like, oh my God, this is amazing. What are you going to do? There's nothing else like it. And of course, you're asking your parents for $5, $10, throwing the quarters in the machine.
So are you talking about Star Wars, or are you talking about Tron? I think we're talking about two different things here.
Two different things. I'm talking about Tron being the arcade.
Tron was blue. I remember it being blue and black.
It was blue, but the game I'm talking about was also blue and black.
Okay. So Tron, here's the thing about Tron. When Tron came out, I lived in Munich, Germany, and we found an arcade off base, or not an arcade. It was like this little place off base that actually had the Tron machine. And when Tron came out, I remember that movie. I mean, it was like, oh my God, look at this.
This was a
CGI, and it was amazing.
It was not where you could. It was amazing. He was right. There's no other words for it. I mean, for being that time, that was the neatest thing in the entire world.
Yeah, Tron is one game that comes to mind. My favorite game of the 80s, especially the early 80s, I lived in Munich. My parents used to go to a bowling alley on the base, and in that bowling alley, there were maybe 9 or 10 video games, one of them being Centipede, one of them being Q*bert, several others. But when Donkey Kong showed up,
oh my!
I spent quarters. Yeah, and I can still, every time I go to a retro arcade or pinball museum and they have Donkey Kong in the back corner, I always find myself gravitating towards it.
Here, we could share. You guys got a way to share here. We could share a couple arcades here just to show the audience.
Oh, you're going to load some audio. Okay.
I'm going to let some audio go through. Here we go. I'm going to start off with Tron, actually. Let's see what this looks like here. Share. That's what Tron used to look like when you'd start up. You remember this, Tim?
I don't hear anything. Sorry,
This is
Jimmy.
the beginning of Tron never actually hooked up until sounds to you actually get into the game.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I was like, yeah, I don't hear it, but
yeah, we don't hear anything on air.
There's
so
no
let's
audio
not-
on this video.
Yeah,
There's no audio on this video. Let's go to the next one.
Well, let's pause there. Let's talk about a few other things and keep the kind of the show moving forward. Let's talk about another. I want to talk about another game. I want to talk about a game that showed up after I moved back from Germany. Would have been 1983 or 4. I think it was 83 when we landed back in the States. And I went to the mall in Frederick, Maryland, Francis Scott Key Mall in Frederick, Maryland. And there was a game in there that, unlike any game I had ever seen before at the time. And let's see if Jimmy can guess what game this is. Fully animated, hard as hell.
already know. I already know.
Hard as hell to play. It was $1 or it was like, I don't know if it was 50 cents because a normal game was $0.25 at the time. It was either 50 cents or $1. And let me tell you something.
Yep.
That was the hardest freaking game, and I dropped $1. What is the
You know
name
why,
of it,
though?
Jimmy? What is
Dragon's Lair.
Yes.
Dragon's Lair. You know why, though? There was a big thing about this. You have to look it on YouTube. There was a Laserdisc. When Laserdisc technology first came out, there was a Laserdisc player that was playing the scenes, and they were pre-done. There's a whole controversy on that.
And you had to hit the stick at the exact time.
Correct.
Yeah. And you're just always
Correct.
either picking left
That
or
was
right. And
that
you're just,
came out during the same time, and that was like, oh my god! So the reason why it was clear is because there was a video player in there playing the game, the scenes.
Okay.
And then you would change your. I
Kind of
watched this-
cheat in there, but yeah.
I watched this YouTube thing on Arcade Classics or something like that, where they rebuild them and they take them apart and the motherboard and all that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. But no, arcade. Think about how arcade changed has paved the way for technology today. I mean, think about some of the things. I mean, you didn't have games. I mean, without that, with the birth of the home consoles and going to arcade, that paved the way for what we see today.
Well, home
does.
consoles didn't catch up to about 2005, I want to say.
That's correct.
So there was a long period there where they were just always on top.
Yeah,
If you wanted to see the new hot thing, you had to go to the arcade.
You know, the consoles today, I mean, everything's cloud, right? Cloud and high-speed internet.
Are the key.
Well, high-speed internet, the internet, and cloud, obviously all not in that order, happened, and it paved the way for the future of video games. Now, it put arcades out of business, basically.
It changed the whole model for arcades because now it's all ticket-based. For the
But
most part,
Yeah.
everything you do is get tickets.
I know I'm going to sound like the old man here, but there's something to say when kids actually went to an arcade and you got out of the house and you actually went to an arcade to play a game and you took your friends. There was it was just part of I mean,
It was that social interaction.
Direction. Yeah.
And
you weren't on Facebook.
Hey,
You weren't on
the high score.
Which is why I'm happy I'm the age I am because, yes, like you guys older got to experience it even more, but still in the 90s, it was still big enough to where I still got to experience it. And I still have plenty of memories.
So you were
of me
introduced,
growing up
you played
in the
for the high
arcades.
score.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I still have many memories of
Tim.
playing Donkey Kong, of playing.
Tim, but the difference for you, bud, is now it's called classic arcades. Back when we were there, it was an actual arcade.
No. In the 90s, those are still arcades.
Well, you know, it's funny
The 90s had
because
some good arcades.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Yeah. Like Street Fighter, I used to play that.
That's
I used to play
Operation Wolf.
that scene in Stranger Things where what's her name? The one character.
11?
No, not 11.
The red-haired girl?
The red-haired girl.
Yeah.
Oh, where I can't.
She's in there. She had a name, and they were like, "Who is this high score?"
yeah.
She had that name on the high score, and they kept trying to guess who it was. Look it up,
was
Jimmy.
her.
And they're like, "Who is this?"
No,
And then
it's great you brought that
falls
up.
in love with her.
Stranger Things is a really good representation for the time.
that's
really
what I
is.
love. Oh, God.
Makes it
That's
so
why I
great.
love that.
I
And
died loving that movie.
And I love that my kids got to, and they asked me a lot of questions. Dad, is that? I go, that was my childhood. That was my childhood.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do next, Jimmy, is we are going to have another beer.
Dig Dug.
I remember Dig Dug.
Max. It was Max.
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 Oh, man.
You know what? And of course, they would name her with 3 letters
Right.
to fit into the high score because that's all you
Because you
could
can only put your initials.
So,
All right, so next.
we're going to have a beer tasting, and then we're going to go into segment 2 where we're going to talk to Jimmy about the nostalgia of it all. We're going to talk Nintendo, and we're going to get into emulation. So, Suds, take it away.
All right. So the next beer is the Gaffelbecker Kolsch. I'm just going to read what they put on their website, which I think was translated, so it's probably not the best English. It says, this superior beer, Cologne's finest, is pure, clear, and light. It is delightfully refreshing, made from specially selected hops and barley, making it most agreeable and supremely drinkable. By maintaining the oldest brewing method, we ensure the distinct fragrance and aromatic flavor that distinguishes Kolsch from other beers, and which has made it popular among beer connoisseurs. Now, Kolsch can only be brewed in Cologne, or Köln, as you would say it there, and that's protected by law. So if you try to brew it outside of there, it's against the law.
That's
In
interesting.
Germany. And it's generally served in a tall, thin cylinder glass, and that's the only way they're allowed to serve it.
Yeah, I've had Kolsch many times before, and I'll tell you,
had
this is probably one of my favorite German beers. I know when you travel, this is considered what is this again, Jared? This is considered what type of beer?
Kolsch?
Yeah.
That's the beer type. Only brewed in Cologne
Oh, okay.
or in the region.
You'll have advertising be like refreshing Coca-Cola, whatever. This is
This is
refreshing.
actually the okay. See, we should know that. We're not beer specialists. We're just beer
Enthusiasts.
lovers. So, that's awesome. So let's get into nostalgia, Nintendo, and emulation with Mr. Jimmy Guest. Let's dive into the power and impact of Nintendo during the 80s. Jimmy, what I remember from Nintendo is my video game console days for me personally kind of stopped in the late 80s and began again in the 2000s. In between, the only thing I played on Nintendo was when I visited my nephew and played Tecmo Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Does everybody remember Tecmo
Bowl?
Bowl?
Tournament
Tecmo Bowl
all the
yeah.
time with friends.
And now I play Madden on Xbox, and that's probably my favorite.
No, it'd be
go-to.
neighborhood friends coming together, and we all just playing Tecmo Bowl all day long. It was a good
Even had a
time.
franchise mode in the
yes.
second one.
Think about it though. Nintendo went through and changed the landscape of gaming and how it was done. If you think about it, right at the time, there was the Atari 2600 and the 5200. Lost a lot of the share of the marketplace.
Yeah, they were
Nintendo
falling
came
down
in.
and
They were
just
falling down. Nintendo came in and swapped it up. Think about the Nintendo Game Boy. The
yeah.
Game Boy changed how portable gaming was done.
Yep. Yeah, you
Tetris
named
alone changed the game.
named the Atari 2600 and the 5200. I had 52 Atari 2600 cartridges.
Nice.
That's how many I had at the time.
That's what I started out on as a console was Atari 2600. Then we bought the 5200. Then for my birthday, I begged for a Nintendo, and I got. Actually, I still have the instruction manual, Super Mario Brothers.
Oh,
and
that's
Duck Hunt.
that's cool.
Yeah, I still have the instruction manual for it. But
Like I was telling you before the show, those instruction manuals are really hard to come by. They're worth a lot. Everyone tossed them and just cared about the game. And
I kept them. I don't know how I kept them, but I found it in a box recently when going through things. Like, oh my god, I still have this. But no, I mean, there's so many things. It changed the playing field. I mean, Nintendo was. I mean, that was it. It's
the bee's knees.
right. We're migrating from the arcade, and then we're moving into the house, and that's kind of where we started down this path, affecting us today.
The theme of the 80s was that, right? Making anything where you could have it home instead of having to go somewhere else.
Well, it was
to
intervention.
do this or that.
It was intervention. Yeah, intervention. A lot of the stuff the 80s is intervention. Is where it came through.
What was evolutionary about the Nintendo? What would you say is the one thing that they
for a child of like mine? I mean, you're going from Pitfall that had like a little graphic and
I
like
love
little
Pitfall.
thing to these graphics that had real-time music, and you could save the game, and you could do all this fun stuff that you couldn't do before.
Yeah.
You had a light gun that you could shoot ducks. Oh, it was in a. Now come to find out, knowing now that you could have just held the light gun here and shot, and the whole thing would work because it went off signals. But
Yeah.
that wasn't okay back then. I mean, you literally bring. Come on, Jimmy's got a Nintendo. Let's go over to his house and let's play Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
It's just it was really innovative because I mean, you don't have that no more. I mean, you got PlayStation 5 and you got like that, but hell, you could sit do what we're doing here, talking to you from Lakeland, Florida, to Pensacola, Florida. You could talk and play a game online. Back then, you couldn't.
Yeah.
Can you imagine playing Super Mario Brothers from what y'all know on a headset? Hey, I'm going to World 8-1. Well, you got to go past 3-1 to get to the warp zone. I mean,
And I want to emphasize on one key thing. Before the Nintendo Entertainment System came out, there was a lot of people trying to make this or that, and it could never take off, right? And if the Nintendo never released, I feel we would be in a completely different reality right now.
It's true.
Like putting back at least 10 years in tech.
Look at a lot of the new novelty little game sticks and consoles that are out. Like they brought back the Atari 2600 and those things, and basically that brings me to emulation.
I was about to say.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about emulation, Jimmy. Tell me your thoughts on emulation and how it has refaced the industry in regards to products.
Emulation and virtual machines are not an old, really, technology. They've been around since the late 70s and early 80s. It's always been a thing to where, I mean, back when they had Crane supercomputers where they would take a room like this, they had emulation or virtual machines that you could run different programs. Emulations recently come back to the whole thing where the 80s are making a comeback. Vinyl is still a big thing. Emulation lets you bring back those arcade machines that we talk and play them.
Yeah.
So basically the computer runs code that basically is looking for commands and simulates the command of what it's supposed to expect from the motherboard. So now you can actually play these things. You could play Nintendo, like Tim was just saying. You could buy a box that has 900 games on it, and all it is a Raspberry Pi emulating a Nintendo.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. There's games, it just kills me.
It's funny with emulation and processors being what's the word I'm looking for? Micro, yeah. Basically made smaller. Everything made smaller.
Is that what you're looking for?
No, it wasn't, but it's something like that. Anyway, so making everything smaller, emulating things, it has spawned 1,000 products out there that are just basically, it's kind of like movies. They're making all these same movies over and over again using modern technology, and it's the same thing we're doing in the tech world. So you can't talk emulation without talking VMs, right? And
Correct.
Virtual machines. Jimmy, explain to the audience what a VM is, what a virtual machine does.
A difference between emulation and a VM and a virtual machine. A virtual machine has a host that it's getting that resources from versus an emulator that's simulating those other things. So for a virtual machine, even back in the 70s, had to have a host that had the microprocessor power to actually convert things and run the machine as it was intended. Yeah. So a virtual machine is the machine as it originally was intended. An emulation is a simulation of that machine.
Yeah,
and AI has a lot to do that too.
One thing I can think about in regards to, in our industry, kind of geeking out here a little bit in regards to VMs, is security. In the healthcare industry specifically in the 90s and the early I'd say the 2000s, all the way up to probably still currently a lot of healthcare organizations use VMs to emulate desktops and be able to, kind of create a desktop as a service type product. We don't do that here because we use different technologies I think it's better in my opinion.
That's correct.
But, and why don't you explain to the audience why VMs were so important in regards to those industries and why they're not as high priority anymore in regards to the new technology that's out?
So for the difference between the two, so a lot of these industries now are smaller location, no more brick and mortar. There's no more, things where you actually could take a server that has twice the power and run 6 devices on it. You can pick up one of those pretty good now and run 6 servers, run it from a centralized location, and you're not running over overhead infrastructure, having a huge server rack. security, having somebody there to watch that nobody's going in all these servers. You have it so where you have one thing and it's secure and you're locked down. The other question I like that is running virtual machines. A lot of the stuff is going cloud-based now, but there's still a thing of having a hardware piece of a machine to you actually log into your resources. That's where the security is at, not where you can like compromise for your virtual portion of it.
That's interesting.
So it's two different things, but it's a little.
They work together.
There's a little bit
in
to
many
it.
ways.
They work together, right?
One thing I know you do, when Digital Boardwalk onboards a new customer, and they have, let's say, 20 servers, right? And usually the old IT guy or whoever was managing that network had a server for every single thing. One of the first things we do is go in and consolidate those using VM technology, right?
That's correct. We go in there and we evaluate the environment, find out what's the loose pockets of it are, and combine the customer's technology and their software into a single server. So whether that be they had 5 app servers and maybe only use 3 pieces of software on each of those and 3 of those like that, we decommission those ones that aren't there and make the system make it more operable, but in the long run, save the client more money.
So let's talk about that.
A lot more secure.
When you go from 5 to 1,
Yeah, so you're consolidating. So you're definitely saving the customer a lot of money. You're creating it's very much like managing a fleet of vehicles. You have less to manage. You can standardize the operations, and it's easier all the way around for the people maintaining it, as well as the customer and the burden of that cash impact that big server farm has.
Everything.
All right, great. So VMs obviously were a game changer in the industry for a lot of different reasons. Let's talk about the interplay of technology and the culture during the 80s and its transition coming into the 90s. Let's talk about, so Bill Gates, I'll kick this off with a famous quote that Bill Gates made back in I think it was in either the 80s or early 90s. I think it was the late 80s. He said, "You'll never need more than 640K of memory." Is that true or false, Jimmy?
False now.
But let's put ourselves in the mind of Bill Gates at the time.
At the time, no, because everything that you needed was going to be involved in that one spot. Back in the 80s, you had floppy disk and Microsoft Windows. One of the first things that paved from the 1980s version, I think 2 or 3, could run under 640K. You basically would start it up. It would come up and run into MS-DOS. You'd run your config sys and your auto execute. Those things would run your basic, like your CD driver and stuff like that. But it all fitted under that thing. So he was correct. As times changed, I think there's also a great video and article on him when the Xbox was being developed, when they wanted to do that thing, and where he actually talked about his original saying, and they asked him how much RAM it is. He went back and said, "Well, I guess I can't do that. Got to work more memory." But it is very interesting, the time frame. I mean, think of Polaroid cameras. We wouldn't have digital cameras on our phone if we didn't have Polaroids back in the 80s.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk. I love this. So you're talking about Polaroids. So let's actually stay on that topic, and let's talk about what we watched as a kid in the 80s, that where the writer actually, as we fast forward to now and we look back at those movies, it makes us think that the writer could actually see the future. One thing that comes to mind is the Jetsons. Talk to me about the Jetsons. A robot that cleans your floor,
cleans your house.
What? Roomba?
Yep.
Right?
Yep. What? Video calling?
Video conferencing, video calling, flying cars.
Still not there, but
we're prototyping. We're electric cars.
There's prototype.
Yeah.
Think about even another TV show, Star Trek. That's a big thing where they come give the captain his report. He would sign off on the thing. That's where PDAs come from.
Right?
PDA to tablets. It was back a PDA back in my day.
Scotty.
Did y'all have a Palm?
Right.
Did y'all have a Palm? I did.
I had a Palm Pilot.
Okay.
I had a Palm Pilot.
Anyway.
I hated it, but
it was stupid. He's right. You like that, you'd be like,
do you remember?
Yes.
Do you remember Microsoft's first phone?
Yes.
Oh,
I had one.
had it. It popped up like this. I I loved it when it came out, and then I quickly began to hate it. And
It ran like a Windows C and E
Yeah.
or something like
They
that.
still
It
can't
was
do
so
something right.
clunky.
They've tried so many times and they still can't.
Well, I wish they could, because I mean, if you think about it, one other movie that comes to mind, and if they could get it right, is the Terminator. I mean, the Terminator. You've got a robot that looks like a human. Okay, think about that for a
First
minute.
of all, AR Terminator. That's what AR is, right? It's just an interface.
Yeah, it was. It was AR.
Right?
Using camera technology and sensors to be able to sense its surroundings. Hello.
Yeah.
No,
Still getting
today's cars, right?
If you get into a thing, and this is like a quick thing about the Terminator, one thing that always got me, and I'll go back to my whole little motto. Terminator 2 had 3 different versions of the movie. Terminator 2 had the theatrical cut, the extended cut, and the director's cut.
Yep.
The director's cut was over 2 hours more long in the movie. And there's a scene where they actually cut his head open the side up, take that, and take the chip out.
Wow.
I've seen it. I've seen it.
That always got to me, because it was like, oh my God, this is like a computer, da 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 da. I love that whole thing.
Now you're forgetting one major one here. Blade Runner, I feel, did
Blade
more
Runner.
than any of those guys in terms of
I still
predicting
remember
the
watching it with
future.
my dad. Yeah,
that
the ending
predicted
of the
the future.
movie. I still have that on my. I still have the
Blade
Blu-ray.
Runner.
Is he human? Is he not?
Jimmy, I can't
Easy
wait to test you in segment 4. We're going to jump into segment 3. There should be a beer tasting right here. Instead, we're just going to see if there's there's no more in these cans. We're going to have to get Suds to fill us up here in a little bit. So we're going to jump straight into segment 3, because it definitely ties into what we were just talking about. This is the segment 3, the precursor to modern innovation, right? So let's talk about technological advancements of the 80s and their evolution, and how they created the technical and digital landscape of today.
Sure.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and name some things, and then you guys talk about it, right?
Sure.
So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the one thing in the 80s that definitely became a thing of today, and that's the PC. We can't talk about the 80s without talking about the PC. Guys?
I mean, the first thing I had was an 8086 to a 286 to a 386, 486, Pentium 2, Pentium 3, Pentium 4, and there I am at today, go like that. So you can't do anything without talking about. I mean, they started out being really expensive, but then they came down to the average thing. That's what we are at today. I mean, I found a book back here, one that was like $1,300 just for the monitor. I have like an 80s sales manual.
Yeah, me being younger, Pentium 4 was my first PC. So
I worked at a computer store where I built I worked at a computer store in the 90s where I actually would build computers.
nice.
So I started with an Atari 2600, Atari 800, and then I went. I ran through the 80s. I mostly used that, and then I jumped into a 486. I want to say it was a 25 megahertz.
Yeah,
486, and that would have been right around 92. And then I used that for a few years, and then I was very poor for a few years and couldn't afford a computer. And then I jumped into a PC 100, 100 megahertz Pentium machine that
was amazing.
Yeah, oh my God, I was blown away.
No,
and
That was amazing. Sound, ad-lib sound card and sound blaster. It was great.
And that's when I really started geeking out and combining business and entrepreneurship and taking my love of technology to the next step.
I'm curious on you and Jimmy on this. So I've worked Apple many years. I'm the Apple guy when it comes to digital boardwalk, because a lot of people just don't even stand looking at them, much less use them. I'm whatever on them. It's not like my preferred method. I just, I like tech, so it's just a part of my repertoire. But where were y'all when it comes to Apple during these up times? That's what I want to know.
I hated Apple. So
I hated Apple.
Apple
was for school.
So Apple was for school, and our computer class in school.
Yeah.
Well, actually, not our computer class, but the computer lab in school
was
Apple IIs. I'm a little older than you, Jimmy. So they
I know.
came into school, and it was the first time computers came to the school, and that was the Apple IIs, and that was in the early 80s.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I
Apple
got to
was
be in there.
giving
I
them
gotta be
away
in
to
there.
schools back then.
And yeah, they gave them away. And I hated Apple. I actually had even on my Atari, I had an Apple logo eater.
So what was your first Apple anything that you actually own?
It's in my back pocket.
The iPhone? Which iPhone?
The
Yeah.
iPhone 14 Pro.
After
Oh,
14,
that was the first.
It's my first
No.
ever Apple device.
I started with an Apple 4, iPhone 4.
But what does this say? What does this say about what Apple has done? When Apple signed the deal with Bill Gates and basically allowed Microsoft's where they combined that and actually allowed Microsoft operating systems to run on Apple and emulate Microsoft, it changed the game because it opened up Apple to so many people that wouldn't have used an Apple device before.
Yeah, I forget the term they use. I mean,
You know,
it's
Microsoft-
booming, but I just don't know I forget the term.
But
think
doesn't
about-
Microsoft still own part? They own, yeah.
Yeah, and to
They
think about this,
saved
though, Tim,
Apple. If it weren't for Microsoft, Apple would be history.
Yeah.
think about this as an aspect of a segue to what you're saying. You had back then. Now you have your phone, your Apple phone, that actually like you learn about place or you learn about a new device, you learn about something. Back then, it was the newspaper, hear it on the evening news.
Yeah.
And you would only Apple IIe for kids represented. I'm going to go play the Oregon Trail at school, and I have to do
Oregon
work.
Trail, yeah.
First of all,
Okay.
shout out to Oregon Trail.
All right, but that represented work. So
Yeah,
who would want to go tell their parents, "Hey,
Nobody.
Mom, I want an
Yeah,
Apple II for my
Makes
home"?
Makes sense.
So let me.
You didn't. I mean, it just nobody wanted it.
I had
So
a
it
friend
became
that had an Apple, and I used to pick on it. I used to go, that thing
dude.
sucks.
Apple gave away because they got tax breaks and money, and there's a whole article about it you can find online now.
But here's the thing: Steve Jobs was a visionary.
Exactly.
Let me just say that Steve Jobs was a visionary, and Steve Jobs was a visionary because he thought about the human element. The same thing we always talk about at Digital Boardwalk
Human
is
element,
the
that's
human
correct.
element. The human element, technology can only do so much, but without the human touch, it's just that.
Without a
It's
good
just that.
interface, what do you have? Yeah.
The human element can change anything for anybody. So let's talk about that. Aesthetics. Steve Jobs said, nobody wants a beige, ugly thing sitting in their living room or dining room. Nobody wants, let's come out with this iMac. Let's make it transparently and colorful and all these things. It was a game changer.
Yeah.
And then, of course, miniaturization. That's the word I was looking for earlier.
Okay. Miniaturization.
Miniaturization. So he did the same thing, and that's going to bring me.
Pixar,
That's
right?
going to bring me to some other things that I want to talk about that were 80s based products that changed the game for today. But he miniaturized. He miniaturized all the things that were created in the 80s. He miniaturized and put into one device, which is sitting
Correct.
right here in front of me. So let me throw out a couple more buzzwords, Jimmy.
Sure.
Let's talk about GUIs. So explain to the audience what a GUI is.
Graphical user interface.
And it came out in the 80s.
It did.
And how did it change everything for everybody?
Everything. So, I mean, GUIs are, a lot of things, even though we're on the space shuttle, where you had, they had things where it's basically was a screen. It had, push this block here, push this here, and then you'd get different responses. You saw it a lot in movies, saw it in Knight Rider.
Yeah.
But basically, that brought us into the modern tech that we have today. Back then, it did stuff, but now it does so much more. You have GUIs for your home entertainment system now. You have GUIs for your automation of your home system right now. GUIs were the predecessor to, it was one of those things I almost want to say the the World of Imagination at Disney World, where it shows you all these technical advances of the things.
Yeah.
Same principle. GUIs were game changing.
Well, I think
Think about it. Go ahead.
I said
Seth.
there's a lot of people today, they don't even realize that everything they use has a GUI. They don't understand that back in the
Your
80s.
phone.
you
I
were
mean, the
typing
Windows
Windows
code.
was a GUI
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were just typing stuff in.
So
the entire time.
Right.
the transition for us old school guys back in the 80s into the world of the mouse was very tough. It was for me,
Correct.
at least. I was
It was.
used to a keyboard controlling everything, DOS-based commands. Zork,
That's what I was about
Jimmy
to say.
Zork,
It's going from DOS to
Zork.
an interface.
I got another funny one.
my
for you.
favorite
Yeah, Zork.
adventure game.
I
in
know
the
what
80s.
Zork is. It's,
Okay.
Zork
he,
I played.
knows, he knows what Zork is.
it's a text-based RPG.
Go to. We played a game. It was go to. Yeah, go to
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
Open door. Take key.
East,
Yeah.
east, north.
To give you a quick representation, so when Windows 95 came out, Windows 3.1 was a GUI. Windows 95 was a complete operating system. My dad took the time when I said, I got Windows 95, Dad. It's going to revolutionize. Got a copy of it. I'm going to bring it over here. And, okay, come over at night. So he took the time to stand in front of the copier. And back in the day, you had your Xerox copier, which you still have today. But he would enlarge Bill Gates until it came up to like poster size. And he taped it to the back of his chair with a big red marker through it.
Ooh.
So that's how people thought about GUIs back then.
Well, let's move on. Let's talk about a few other things in the 80s that were created in the 80s that changed the future and changed how we use and interface with technology today. Let's talk about CDs.
Oh, wow.
Now, we don't use CDs anymore. Everything's cloud-based, on demand, Netflix,
Even
music, iTunes. But back when me and Jimmy were growing up, we had to rewind music. We had to rewind it and wait for it to rewind in order to get to the next song.
I have
If
a
you
really
wanna go to
big thing I
Blockbuster
have
Video,
to
you
say
gotta
right
rewind.
here that's very pivotal to this. So when I was real little, the only reason I'm even here doing this show is because I became an audio geek. And it's because I had this R2D2 little tape recorder deck.
Yeah.
Right? And I would sit there and record skits on it. I would record radio planes, whatever I could, try to put stuff together all through this little tape recorder. I have so many memories of me being little messing with audio. And it always ever stuck ever since. I've always been obsessed over trying to make things sound cooler, better, different. And it all starts from that little R2D2 little tape recorder, Sony Walkman, I want to say it was.
Oh, we're gonna talk about the Sony Walkman because
Yeah.
you can't talk about
Boomboxes.
Yeah.
boom boxes.
Yeah.
I used to go out on the playground with my boom box on my
I
shoulder,
would
and I got
record from a boombox.
That's funny.
Well, that's how you recorded your radio. You
Yeah.
go on a radio
Yeah.
station, you put a cassette in, press play and record.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm going to name a few. So CDs, obvious. It's obvious.
are
No more
pivotal.
rewinding. Walkmans is on my list.
Oh my gosh.
Walkmans. I remember getting my first one. I lived in Munich.
Modern MP3 player.
Yeah. Exactly. VCRs.
Oh.
Yeah.
Come on,
Guys,
VCRs. Being able to watch a movie in your home.
Think about TV. You got to remember, there's no streaming. You have ABC, CBS, and there was no Fox. There was like that, and you on the nightly, you'd see
Cable
a movie on,
TV.
like, cable TV. You would be able to record it.
Cable TV came out in the early 80s, I believe.
Early 80s. It was like 82, 83.
That
it was like the first
yeah.
cable box with like switches. Like you turn
and then,
it
of course, video game consoles, because Atari came out. You had Coleco, you had Activision. Activision. So Activision, Coleco, and Atari.
Oh, what was the other one? Atlantis or
Sega.
Image or something.
Well, there was one that started
Sega.
with an I that what you would lay an interface over the controller to have different
Yeah,
buttons.
so that started the whole code thing.
Yeah,
Like that, where
yeah.
you put the whole thing on there and you'd be able to do different functions. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up that part of it. We're going to dive into Jimmy's role at Digital Boardwalk, understand your daily challenges and the impact that 80s tech inspirations had on you and how it helped develop your current role at Digital Boardwalk. Let's talk about it.
I think the best thing you could say, and you mentioned it earlier, is the culture of the human touch that actually developed a lot for me at Digital Boardwalk. I know Tim Schaefer, you've heard me a lot talk to people about you got to make that phone call, you got to make that connection, you got to make that one person, because there's still a point in today's society that we miss that human touch. So the 80s focused a lot on teaching me there's things that, you take for granted, things that were so simple. Things were simpler back then on some things, but a lot of times when you appreciate those things, you know of the challenges that people have with technology. So the time when people are actually calling in and speaking to you on it, you know that they have a problem and you're able to relate and actually kill that problem. So where my job with Digital Boardwalk as technical escalations manager comes is I take care of some of the clients that have and bear me taking another line from a movie. I'm not happy unless I'm doing Mach 10 and my hair's on fire. Top Gun. That is able where I'm able to multitask, and it taught me. I mean, I don't think you mentioned it earlier on here about no machine has ever beat me, and that's where it comes from. Back a lot of stuff growing up is that you were challenged in school. I mean, you think school stuff like now, but you had like things, and there was I learned at an early age of that's how I learned and I was successful is to be able to fix and make people happy. And so doing what I do here, helping other people happy, teaching people, teaching our technicians, teaching things to where we go is what brings me to be able to give my gifts back to others.
As a leader here at Digital Boardwalk, I talk a lot about wowing the customer and how you have to talk and before you talk, you have to listen. You have to listen because if you don't listen, you can't identify. And if you can't identify, you can't resolve.
Correct. And I mean, that's the example I gave to the team lead, the team's team meeting, is told him, I said, think about it for all, well, look at it. You have to listen. You have to resolve. If you're wanting to, and we're all a bunch of nerds here, but let's take the air conditioning industry. If your air conditioner goes out in your house, all you're going to think about is, hey, when's that guy coming to fix my call? Same thing. You have to be able to relate to your tech client and be able to talk so that you can help them. That's all they're wanting. They're just like you and me. So to do that is, again, my pleasure and my drive in life to help others.
So it sounds like a really cool place, and it sounds like you probably have a really cool boss.
I do. He's a very cool boss. He's on vacation though right now, but
I was talking about me.
I know. That's why I said that. You are my direct. Yes, I know. I was laughing.
Hey, there's no shortage of ego here, buddy.
I love picking on him.
Oh, man. Hey, Mr. Sangria, let's get into it. So,
hey, Sangria is very good.
No, it is. I like to pick on. Yeah, it is, unless all your buddies order a pint of beer at the beer place and you ask for Sangria. That's the only time it's not cool.
All right. Well, that only happened when
the buddies.
That only happened when I took Suds out to see Transformers the movie. Okay, that's the whole problem.
Suds is the one that brought that story about the Sangria back to the rest of the Digital Boardwalk population.
Oh, God. So you can blame him.
He told on you.
I don't know what you guys are talking
about. Suds, where are you? He's hiding back there now.
It's a funny story. We could tell it for people to laugh real quick.
Go tell the story, Suds.
Yeah, we were going to see Transformers. What was it, an anniversary or just a special show?
It was the anniversary.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't shut up because I repeated every line.
Oh, yeah. And we stopped at a pizza place next door and had some drinks. And, we ordered our beers. And then he didn't know what to get. And he said, I'm going to do sangria. And I was like, I don't think I said anything in the moment, but I was thinking, oh, my gosh, sangria? But then we go to the movie, go to Transformers, and of course I know a lot of the lines. I think Jimmy knows them all, and we're there, and it's all people who've seen the movie, and we start just saying the lines out loud, and there were people getting mad, and that's it's like when you go see back in the day, you would know Rocky Horror Picture Show back in the day, you were supposed to yell out with the lines, and it's the same thing when you go see an old movie.
Well, we're going to put that to the test here in just a few minutes. We got a couple more questions to ask Jimmy, and then we're going to get into the final very short bit on soundbite trivia, and we're going to see what Jimmy knows in the world of 80s movies. But first, I'd like to ask you a couple more questions before we move on to that. So tell me about the daily challenges and how did your past help with you tackling every day at Digital Boardwalk? I mean, the 80s, what 80s tech impacted you in your current role, I guess would be my question.
The culture of the 80s helps mold it helped molded me into where I am. I learned to learn on stuff, to reverse engineer stuff in the 80s to actually, for people that didn't have anything, and like when you don't have anything, kind of like we mentioned your BBS and stuff like that, I learned how to think of things outside the box, meaning that anything I touch, I want to reverse engineer it in my head and figure out how it works. So to help me in my current role in escalations, that helps me to think, Tim, you have a microphone there. It's connected by a wire and it goes back around to the corner to an amplifier. That's how I look at things, because in the 80s, you were always trying to figure out how to put things together. They had Radio Shack back in the day, so you could buy wires to put things together. Heck, I had a toy lab where you built projects. You don't have that no more.
Yeah.
Those things gave me the skills that I have now.
I miss Radio Shack. I used to.
Radio Shack,
that was one of my favorite stores to go into.
That was one of my first jobs, by the way.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
I loved Radio Shack.
I have a story. I don't know if we have time here. It'll take 5 seconds. But this lady brought in an old TV, right, that had like a built-in VCR into it. The tape was stuck into the VCR player, and she's like 85, 90, barely able to like walk up in the store, really pressing it there, and was just begging for somebody to be able to get this tape out of this thing. And then go to talk to her more. She had an old wedding video on there whenever she was like in her 20s. She really wanted this tape. So I'm like, forget everything else. I just feel it's too important to like, what am I going to do? Sell some headphones? No, I'm going to help this lady get this wedding thing out of this VCR. And so I spent a good hour and a half just helping her, just begging my manager, look, just leave me alone. Let me work on this thing. And I got it out. I saved it, cleaned it up a bit. We literally got it where I could stick it back in. I made sure everything was functional before just jamming it back in. She watched it, just started crying, just hugged me and was just like, and I was just like, this is the best thing I could ever do to somebody.
It's a good point, Tim, because we don't have, I don't want to keep going on it, but we don't have, back there, we have repair shops. Like service centers, where you would take your equipment. Now it's so cheap, you just buy new. And that's the culture of now. But back then, you'd have service manuals, how to fix something like that, and it'd tell you the piece, the material, and how to do it.
It's funny. I feel sorry for all the guys that are still running break fix shops, because I used to own one, and it happened.
Parts cheaper on Amazon.
Well, with the transition of things and the prices driving lower, it forced me into a new industry, and I thank God every day for doing that. Amen. Because that's the beauty of technology. We can create jobs. If you have a good idea, you can create a job in this industry out of nothing if you put your mind to it. Yeah. So let me go to the last segment. We are going to introduce our fun next trivia segment. We're going to call it Name That Nerd. Yeah. You get it? Name that nerd. All right, so we're going to tease Jimmy for his love of 80s films. We're going to play 6 audio clips from iconic 80s movies. And for each, I'm going to start by, telling you what I need from you. For each one's going to be different, what I need from you on each one. You'll have about 3 seconds, which is quicker than Googling, to answer. And these are easy. I made them easy. So I purposely for the show, because I don't want to bore our customers with dead air of Jimmy thinking. So let's see how good you really are. Jimmy claims to know the lines front to back for a lot of famous 80s movies. So for the first one, I'm going to ask for several pieces of data. Suds, get your stuff ready on the mixing board if you're ready. We're going to start with A first. Jimmy, you're going to name the year this movie was released. You're going to name the 2 main characters that are in the scene. You're going to name the actors that played the characters. And you're going to finish the scene.
Oh.
So the first thing I'm going to want you to do is give me the title of the movie, the year it came out, and then finish the scene while you still have it fresh in your head. So ready? 3, 2, 1.
Wouldn't a fly swatter be easier?
Man who catch fly with chopstick accomplish anything.
I think it was 83. It's the Karate Kid, Pat Miyagi, Nori. I can't pronounce his name, but it's Mr. Miyagi, Pat Miyagi, and it's Ralph Macchio as Daniel Maruso. And I know the scene. They're in his apartment. They're in the side where it's the place where Mr. Miyagi had his shop at the hotel, at the apartment building, and they're just about to go back out at that point. I don't remember all the lines to that one, but
all right, it was 1984. It was Daniel LaRusso played Daniel LaRusso and Mr. Miyagi were the characters, played by Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita. Can you name Mr. Miyagi's full name?
No, I can't name his full name correct.
It's Nariyoshi Kasuki Miyagi.
Okay.
And if you want to finish the scene,
I would say Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
when he says after he watches him with the fly and the chopsticks, he says, "You ever catch one?" Mr. Miyagi says, "Not yet." He says, "Can I try?" He says, "If wish."
Beginner's
And
luck.
Daniel catches one. He says, "Hey, Mr. Miyagi, look, I caught one." And Mr. Miyagi says,
Beginner's luck.
"Yes,
Beginner's luck.
Yes, beginner luck." He doesn't say it.
I remember. I told you that takes me a while.
All right, for the next one, I don't need you to finish the scene. All I need is the name of the movie, the year it came out, the two main characters in the scene, and who played them.
Okay.
In college, great. It's going to be a great year.
Uh-oh. Oh, we got Jimmy stomped.
College is going to be a
Play
great
it again.
year.
Play it again.
Play it again.
Is that
College,
Animal House?
great. It's going to be a great year.
Is that Animal House?
No, come on. That's an iconic laugh, Jimmy. Play it one more time.
All right.
In college, great. It's going to be a great year.
It's going to be a great year. I'm trying to focus on the college is going to be a great year.
He's 1 out of 2, Tim. We got him. I can't believe it.
You've seen my Plex server.
It's not on there?
It's Revenge of the Jimmies. I mean, Revenge of the Nerds.
Revenge of the Nerds. I didn't really watch that. I never watched that. I never did.
What year?
Everything happened for me 82 to 86.
All
I could
right.
not tell
Most
you
of
the year.
these are going to be
Well,
during
you
that
have homework.
era.
Yeah.
So this is
82 to 86.
1984. The characters' names were Lewis Skolnick and Gilbert Lowe.
I never watched that because
Dude, it's great.
Played by
my mother didn't like. Yeah.
played by Robert Carradine and Anthony Edwards.
Oh,
All right, so
Goose.
for the next one, same rules apply. Name of the movie, year it came out, the two main characters in the movie, not necessarily in the scene, and the two actors that played them.
Once again, Sarah Connor, 35, mother of two, brutally shot to death in her home this afternoon.
You're dead,
In
honey.
other late-breaking news,
Terminator. I don't remember I'm not good on
Take a
years
guess.
on these. 84, 5?
You got it. 84.
It's 84, 85 because I remember when my
84.
dad went to see it.
84. Two characters. One of them.
Sarah Connor.
Now, how did you guess that?
Sarah? When they sang and I said, "You're dead, honey," and then she was talking to her roommate.
Oh, she said her full name, Sarah Connor.
She was talking to her roommate, yes.
She was talking to her roommate.
Who played her?
Oh, you're going to ask me that. I can't.
Where
Linda
were they
Hamilton.
when they
Linda
were talking?
Hamilton. Linda
Yes.
Hamilton, and they were their apartment.
And who's the other main actor in the
I
movie?
don't remember the name of the other actor.
Arnold
I can see it in my head.
Schwarzenegger.
Main actor.
Well,
Main
yeah, but you're saying in the scene.
we got
You
him.
said in the scene. No, you
Trick
said in the
question.
scene.
You weren't
He
paying
was
attention.
thinking the two girls.
No, when you
Yeah.
rewatch this podcast, when I introduced this segment, I said not necessarily in the scene.
All right, fair
I'm
enough.
I'm
Arnold
trying to get
Schwarzenegger.
him. I'm trying to get him. But I think-
Terminator, I get. I mean, come on.
I can't wait till we get to number 6 because I think the audience will be impressed.
All right.
But yes, it was the Terminator, Sarah Connor, and the Terminator played by Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was I loved when that movie came out.
It was great.
So the next one,
How many lines? He had that many lines in that movie.
so the next one, all the same information, but we also want you to finish the scene.
I can guess.
All right, go.
This readout tells you where you're going. This one tells you where you are. This one tells you where you were.
It's Back to the Future.
Yes. What year?
Oh God, that has to be 85.
85. Got it. Good.
Okay.
Who are
Michael
the
J.
two?
Fox, Christopher Lloyd,
Yes. And
That's what
what
goes-
were their characters' names?
Doc Brown, and Marty McFly.
What was Doc's first name? Oh, come on, Jimmy.
Oh, come on, you gotta get me on the spot. Emmett Brown.
you
Brown.
got it.
Emmett
All right,
Brown.
he Googled
Emmett
it.
Brown.
He Googled it.
This has got.
He Googled
It's let's say you want to see the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah,
Or
and-
the birth of our
Yes.
Lord.
Yes.
Oh, here's the song. It's December 1950. Yes, of course.
What day?
December,
What day?
December.
No. November.
No, it was November 19.
55. November 5th.
55, 1955. And then he goes in and says, what happened? Oh, that's the day I invented time travel.
Yes,
I was sitting up.
Jimmy.
See, I remember that one.
Okay.
I watched that over and over again.
Jimmy, because you were so good at that one, we're going to go ahead and give you what you missed on 2, or on the last one, which was Arnold Schwarzenegger. So we're going to go ahead.
Oh, come on. I knew it was Arnold in the movie. That's not fair. Go ahead.
Hey, we still got you on Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah. Oh, you got me there. Mother never really watched that.
The next one, all I need you to do is name the movie, the year, the actor, and the character he played.
Okay.
Computer, an extension of the human intellect. The NCOM 511.
Oh, this is
center of the most calculating intelligence on Earth.
This is Tron.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's Tron.
Yes, it is Tron. What year?
Tron, but 82?
82, you got it. Who's the actor?
And Bridges? Jeff
yes,
Bridges?
Jeff Bridges. What was his character's name?
God, I just watched this the other day and prepped for this.
And you know what's funny, guys? You know how I always Googling it. You know what? You know what's funny about this? He didn't know it until they named the computer name.
Right?
And then he goes, "Oh, that's Tron." I watched.
That's Tron. Incom.
The bleeps and boops alone should have.
I was watching the expression on his face.
That was the very beginning of the movie, though. Yeah. That was the very beginning of the movie.
Well, that's actually part of the trailer. It's the beginning of the trailer.
Yeah. But there was a part of it where it tells like that. I can't remember his name.
So audience, if you don't know about Tron, it's where a computer programmer and video game developer who is transported inside the software world of a mainframe computer where he interacts with programs in his attempt to escape. Great movie, but by today's standards, the CGI sucks. So
Tron 2 is basically the same thing as Tron.
Yeah. And then you got Legacy and so we got to keep this moving because we only got a few more minutes. So we're going to go into the next one. It's going to be the same thing. You don't have to finish. Well, actually, this is the last one. So what we want you to do is name the movie, the year it came out. I want you to name the main characters' names, 3 characters, the 3 actors that played them, and I want you to finish the scene and the entire movie if you can figure it out. So go ahead, Suds, take it away.
Great actual physical contact. Can you move?
Okay, so that's great, Ray. Say something for me. Get down right away. I just went to a ballroom. Okay, we'll be right there. All right, if you and the owners could stay right there, we'll take care of everything. It goes in, voice like dun 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 dun, and it sees the thing, and it says, "There he is on the ceiling. That's the guy who got me."
So what's the movie?
Ghostbusters. Dan Aykroyd.
What year?
That's 82, isn't it?
84.
84. No, it was 84 because I was like, we was there.
Who played Peter Venkman?
Bill Murray.
Okay.
Dan Aykroyd.
Played who?
Dan Aykroyd played Ray.
Ray Stantz.
Ray Stantz. Egon Spengler is played by Harold Ramis.
Okay.
And Ernie Hudson, who I actually met.
And they were 3 eccentric what? 3 eccentric what?
Nerds.
3 eccentric parapsychologists.
Parapsychologists. Yeah, but
who started a ghost catching business in New York City. But the line, you got it a little wrong, Jimmy. Now, I was impressed when everybody said you could recite this whole movie. So what I'm going to do is have Suds play it one more time. I'm going to go ahead and finish it.
Great actual physical contact. Can you move?
Oh, I feel so funky. So funky.
Ray, come in, please. Ray, okay, come in, please. Spengler, I'm with Venkman. He got slime. That's great, Ray. Save some for me.
See, I remember some of it.
No, you're good, man.
I'm actually better when I see the scene come up in my head and I can remember it after that. So I had to replay it a couple times in my head when you said that.
All right. Here you go.
This is our last little thing we want to show for you. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. These are Nintendo cartridges that Mr. Schaefer brought in. We're going to pull out 3 or 4 of these cartridges because we are short on time. We're going to see what impact the title has on you. So first one.
Right. The obvious.
Super Mario 3. I played that with my brother all the time.
Yeah. All right. This one was gigantic, of course.
Yes, that was a good one.
Tetris.
Didn't play it as much though.
That
Tetris
was
good.
Game
Yeah.
Boy is where that one was.
Game Boy was.
That's where the movie was good on that Tetris.
Now, right?
Can't see that one. What is that one?
Mega Man.
Mega Man.
Oh, Mega Man. Yes,
Yeah.
I had. See,
How
we
are
were
you
able to
on
rent
Mega
those
Man?
from- I did great, but we only was able to rent those from Blockbuster Video when you can rent Nintendo games.
Okay. An obvious one.
Legend of Zelda.
Yeah. Now,
Is that the first
did
one
you
with
actually?
saves?
It's the first one with saves.
Yes,
Did you
that was the first one
play
with saves. Yes,
and
I beat-
actually complete this?
Yes.
Until the battery died. I had to leave it
Robin
on
Williams,
all the time.
shout out to
We have
him.
Nintendo Power.
He named his daughter after Zelda.
Yes.
We
We have Nintendo Power.
You do. I think you know this. This was in the arcades as well.
Double Dragon.
Yep.
Looked like it.
Yep.
Double Dragon 2 is what it looked like.
It was nice.
Okay.
And then one last one here. I mean, I have a bunch, but see if you can make that out.
Bionic Commando.
Bam.
Ooh.
Okay.
Great. So thanks for bringing those in, Tim. This has been awesome. We got to stump Jimmy on his 80s knowledge. So
He
I'm
didn't stump me
very
on
proud of
Ghostbusters.
myself for putting those sound bites into the segment. Jimmy, I'm just picking
You got me
you
on the Fringe of the Nerds.
I will tell you did fantastic. And I'm very impressed by you and by what you know and definitely the nostalgia. I know every time we
Yeah.
get together and talk
It's always
80s,
a ball.
we geek out, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
I want
Amen.
to thank you for your stories.
Thank you for having
especially,
me.
I think my favorite part was about your dad and your uncle. And when you dove in, I could tell that you and your dad were really close, and how he was a big inspiration for you in this space. Our next episode, we will be bringing in a very special guest in the insurance industry and how he has taken it across the country in the public speaking events. And he has combined his past experiences in the Marines with what he is doing now to teach others how to lead.
Cool.
And we'll introduce him at the next segment. Jimmy, thanks again. And thank you everyone for helping us get this show out there. Please share it with your friends. Tell your friends, tell others. These guys are badass. They got cool guests and they drink really good beers.
Leave us good reviews. 5 stars. Let's go. I do.
5 stars.
Thank you. Cheers, my fellow nerds and beer lovers. Stay tuned for more Nerds on Tap. Oh, and one more thing. Help us spread the nerdy love and the love for great brews by sharing this podcast with your friends, colleagues, and fellow beer enthusiasts. Let's build a community that embraces curiosity, innovation, and the enjoyment of a cold one.